Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the spooktacular show with no name. For the rest of October, I'll be reviewing horror-themed media, and today I'm going to review a classic B-movie, The Screaming Skull. Released in 1958, this film was met with negative critical reception. Since then, it's been featured on MST3K and has gained somewhat of a cult following. But how does it stack up? Let's find out. This is The Screaming Skull. The movie begins with some narrator that we never hear again, telling us something about the movie that we're about to witness.
Its impact is so terrifying that it may have an unforeseen effect. It may kill you.
Really? Okay, then I'm just not gonna see it.
Its producers feel they must assure
No, seriously though, that is an immediate turnoff. Even if the film really was that scary, you shouldn't just say it. All this does is annoy the audience by fishing for compliments before the movie even really starts. Anyway, we cut to the opening title. Weak, slow jump scare much? Seriously, that took way too long. The movie proper begins with two people, Eric and Jenny, moving back to Eric's place after they get married. Jump cut! Anyway, they make small talk, chat about two peacocks that are in their yard for some reason, and go into the house.
Rather forbidding now, I suppose, empty like this. But it was usually this way.
Is this narration, or is he actually talking? It's so echoey, it's really hard to tell. So, while they're inside the house, the two protagonists make more small talk, flirt, be boring, and generally do the things that characters in bad horror movies do in the first act. They're basically just wasting time. Why is Russell Crowe watching them? Okay, after that scene of that guy being weird, we get another scene of exposition, where Eric explains who that guy was.
That's right. Oh, that's where Mickey keeps his gardening things.
Who's Mickey?
The gardener. He's kept it up the 2 years I've been away.
By himself?
That's right.
He's worked awfully hard.
Oh, he and Marion would spend hours on end.
Look, I was just making small talk, I really don't care. After our two boring characters explain stuff and say boring things, two more boring characters arrive to explain more stuff and say more boring things. Here's a good time to bring up one of the most annoying things about this film. The constant cutting.
Mrs. Snow.
I'm very happy to meet you. Jenny, this is a lovely surprise.
And the Reverend Mr. Snow. Hello, my dear.
Oh, she's sweet, Eric.
I happen to be going into town. I ran into Mr.
That's what we in the criticism business like to call being visually annoying. So, after more explaining, Mickey appears. Here is a rarity. In this frame, every single character in the entire movie is on screen. Yes, there are only 5. So our quartet of ho-hum bores goes inside and does more things that I don't care about. Oh my gosh, the dull zaniness is off the charts! After that, the film quite randomly cuts to Mickey, who appears to have kept a painting of Eric's ex, Marion. I'm only bringing this up because it comes into play later on. The two couples split up, with Jenny going with the Reverend and Eric taking a walk with the Reverend's wife. Eric begins yet another exposition dump, explaining that Jenny is high-strung and rather impressionable. I don't even think Eric has had any dialogue yet. It's just exposition. By the way, you might also hear a problem with the machine gun cinematography as well.
Wonderful.
It's not at all like Marion, and I think that's for the best. You know, so many men...
Consistent background noise? Who needs it? It's just a movie. So we take a break from that explanation to go to another explanation. That's majority of this beginning of the film, people. The Reverend tells Jenny about Marion's death, something that I would want to know much sooner if I were her, but whatever. As it turns out, Marion's death is one of a very unlikely accident.
While she was coming down this path, apparently it began to rain very hard. Perhaps she slipped on a leaf. The face of her skull was smashed. It was thought that she hit her head on the edge of the cement wall where we were sitting. And she fell in there. She died in the water. That's where everything...
Wow, that sounds like the most suspicious death ever. She slipped on a leaf, hit the back of her head on the pond's edge, and still ended up in the water. Was there no inquiry into this at all? I mean, that's like saying, well, she was watering the rose garden when she must have tripped on a clump of dirt, fell over, and impaled her face on an axe that was just lying on the ground next to her. No red flags raised in the slightest? None? Okay, then. We cut from that exposition dump to another scene of Mickey being hysterical, but this one ends rather suddenly.
And don't forget that you and Eric are coming for lunch.
I guess that mental breakdown wasn't very noteworthy. So this very boring day finally ends, and the guests leave with one more bit of exposition.
Edward, did you know that Jenny's very wealthy?
Oh, yes, Mr. Morrow told me in town today.
Once again, I'm only showing you this because it comes into play later in the movie. So after that exposition, we see Mickey being weird. See a pattern here? This is the entire first act. Exposition, Mickey being weird. Exposition, Mickey being weird. So the two make more boring small talk that nobody cares about before bed. The bedroom isn't finished, so they apparently have to sleep in separate rooms of the house. Whoa! What was that? There was no indication that he snuffed it, or blew it out, or extinguished it by squeezing it. Did he just put out that candle with the power of his mind? Anyway, Jenny goes to bed, and we finally get the ball rolling. Jenny is awoken in the midnight dreary by this strange tapping noise. She gets up and finds that it's just the window. Only this and nothing more. Or is it? Really? You're turning a painting into a jump scare. Why is she so scared by a painting? Here's another random painting. Scared yet? How about now? But we as the audience already knew about that painting, so why would we get startled? What should have happened was one of two things. Option 1, pan the camera to the other end of the room, showing that there is no painting there. Have her look out the window, pan back, and have the painting appear. Option 2, have her look at the painting when she enters the room. She can be creeped out by it, but not scared. Then have her look out the window, pan back, and reveal that the painting is now a foot away and not across the room from her. Or whatever. Now let's talk about the acting in the film. The lady who played Jenny was pretty good, but the rest of them are various levels of wooden, the worst offender being Eric. His acting is so stilted and awkward.
You may as well know. He does look for Marion night after night down by that pond. And he probably comes there afterwards. I'm going to speak to Mickey in the morning.
They discuss how Jenny had heard a strange screaming sound in the night, but Eric believes that it's just the peacocks. Wow, did those peacocks really just stay in that one spot the entire time? Wait, did he just throw something at them? Ugh, we get it. Cut it out with the misdirection. After a night of quote-unquote thrills, Jenny tries to get to know Mickey better in a very, very insensitive way.
Marion must have loved her garden. We'll keep them lovely for her always. You know what I'd like to do, Mickey? I'd like to pick some of the nicest flowers and take them to her. Would you like that?
Tactful. While you're at it, why don't you just tell him that his parents hate him and that he'll never get married?
When I was a little girl, I used to want to be a caterpillar.
What?
I was a very little girl.
What? Anyway, they go look at Marion's grave, they get spooked, and it cuts to the following night. She's looking at the painting, which is still not creepy. Shouldn't she, like, have a reaction to the cabinet clearly opening by itself? Keep in mind that cabinet opened by itself for later. She goes to bed and is woken up from her superimposed mares by the same noise from last night. She goes to the painting room and meets another jump scare. Okay, really, if you're trying to startle the audience, don't be so slow with it. Well, anyway, she goes back to her room to sit down and look scared, I guess. Then the movie just alternates between shots of her and shots of the house for like 2 minutes. Then she gets up, throws the skull out the window, then sits back down to do the same thing that she was just doing. Enthralled yet? By the way, the skull moves on its own. Keep that in mind as well. She hears more noises and does some further investigation. Okay, how about instead of giving me 3 treasure chests in one turn, how about you just try letting me capture an idol? Just once. I need that idol to involve Selena and... Huh? Oh yeah, the movie. Yeah, so... Holy cow, is this scene still going? I mean, this scene goes on for like 10 minutes and nothing interesting happens at all. Thankfully, the scene ends with the closest the movie ever actually gets to a scare, but sadly it's paired with the rather unfortunate music sting. And then the scene finally ends. The two discuss how crazy Jenny is and decide to ask for help from the Reverend.
Did you find anything, Eric? Nothing yet. Surely, Jenny, you must agree with me. Anything as fragile as a skull would have been smashed to bits down there. And Eric has found nothing.
Really? I wasn't aware that skulls were that fragile. It's a skull, not fine china. It's designed to protect your brain. It's pretty hard. Then, at long last, Jenny says why she's so scared of that painting. It reminds her of her mother.
I grew up loving my father and hating my mother. Well, she never knew it. Something I kept to myself. I used to lie awake at night and wish she were dead.
Well, that isn't very unusual. I understand many children go through such a period.
What? The Reverend thinks that it's normal for a child to sometimes lay awake at night and wish that their mother would die? Is this movie in another dimension entirely? Jenny's anxiety seems to get worse, so Eric takes the psychology into his own hands. You know, I remember hearing about a film where something similar happened. It didn't go that well. Jenny and Eric burn the painting, and while they're putting out the remaining embers, Jenny gets another skull scare.
There is no skull there, Jenny, darling. There's no skull there. There's no skull.
And then we actually get a decent twist. All of this is Eric's doing. He wants Jenny to be sent to the asylum so that he can have all of her money. I wasn't really aware that that was how it worked, but whatever. There are 3 problems with this twist, however. Problem number 1. The actual reveal needs some work. What if Jenny didn't faint? How would he be able to hide the skull then? Problem 2. The fact that clearly supernatural things happened, things that Eric couldn't have set up. The movie's either being very bad at details or being very bad at hiding the fact that this isn't the real twist, which brings us to problem number 3. This isn't even close to the end of the movie. We know this isn't it. Anyway, Mickey sees Eric hide the skull and runs off to go tell the Reverend. Why he would do this and not just tell Jenny, I don't know. Meanwhile, Eric decides to just quit beating around the bush and kill Jenny outright, but before he can do that, a rather predictable twist occurs. The reveal that there actually was a ghost after all. You know, this whole real, fake, real thing might not have been that predictable in 1958, but it's certainly predictable now. At least House on Haunted Hill had the decency to add another fake at the end. When Jenny gets back to the house, Eric tries to strangle her, but then hears the knocking. He doesn't make sure that she's really dead, something that any decent murderer would do, and goes to answer the door. A decent scene follows with the skull chasing him around, which ends with a brawl in the pond. Is he fighting the skull or making out with it? Anyway, Eric dies, Jenny is alive, and the others arrive at the scene. Things then wrap up with a rather strange line.
The question is now, did Marion die in an accident? I suppose we'll never know.
1. that's a weird thing to end the movie on. And 2, do you really think that Marion's death could have ever been an accident? Even now? So that was The Screaming Skull. Was it good? No. As a horror movie, it had a decent idea, but it wasn't executed very well. Was it a funny bad movie? Yes and no. It was boring for the first part, but it does pick up halfway through. While I wouldn't really recommend against it, I still think that there are better films to watch if you want to see some funny old horror movies. See you next time on the chilling and thrilling Show with No Name.